Tree walkway.
All right, I want to welcome everybody tonight and thank you, first of all, for coming. We're excited to be offering a remote option. We know that not everybody's as comfortable coming back on site to school, and we certainly respect that opinion, and we want to make sure that we support these kiddos that are going to be learning from home in the best way we know how. So again, I appreciate you being here. Before I forget, because I'm afraid I might forget to mention it, we have books and computers ready to go for anybody who's here on site. Any of you that are joining us online, we're going to give you some information here in just a little bit about our tech department, how to get a hold of them. So if you're not here on site tonight, then you're welcome to contact our tech director or our tech department directly, and we'll have books there and also the Chromebook there for you to be able to pick up whenever you arrange a time. And they're really flexible. They're happy to accommodate your schedule. So like I said, just make sure you make contact with our tech department and get that arranged, and you'll be in good shape with your materials and also your technology. The first thing before I get started with some of the details, I want to introduce a few people here tonight that are just going to help me present and help give some of the details of what remote learning looks like for our middle school and high school students this year. So I've got one of our high school special education teachers, Mrs. Glidewell over here, and then we've got one of our 6th grade teachers, Mrs. Combs, another 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Bailey, and we've got our assistant principal in the back of the room kind of running the meeting from back there, Mr. Menard. And then we've had several other people involved in the process of creating this learning plan. You know, you guys all experienced virtual learning last spring whenever schools were shut down. And one of the reasons we're having this meeting tonight is because this is a very different instructional model. And the reason it is so different is because we have different requirements and we have more time to plan, and we are going to make sure that we're meeting the requirements of the state. And we also want to make sure that we do a great job of getting your kids in front of our certified teachers for their instruction. And so we feel like we have a plan in place that's going to do a good job doing those things. I'm going to start first with the time commitment. So if you chose remote learning to start the school year, there is a time commitment that you have committed to a quarter of learning that way. So if you get into 2 weeks of remote learning and you don't like it, your commitment still lasts through until the end of the first quarter, because we don't want kids coming in and out of that unless we just have some that maybe have to quarantine or those kinds of things on a case-by-case basis. But for the most part, we want our remote learners to stay remote for the remainder of the quarter. If at the end of the quarter you decide that, hey, remote learning is not for me, or I feel safer now going back to school on site and we're still going to school on site, then you can make a change at that point, and that's perfectly fine. One of the things that I also want to make sure that you are aware of by choosing remote learning as your learning option is that you are opting out of activities both as a participant or attending those activities. Okay? And our rationale for that is if you're not comfortable with your child coming to school on site and you're concerned about their health and safety in that way, then we feel like then those kiddos participating in activities would be consistent with your decision to choose remote learning. And so that's just something that you need to make sure that you're willing to give up if you want to be a remote learner. So we've never allowed homeschool or virtual students to participate in activities either, and this is consistent with that policy as well. One of the key differences as we embark upon this new school year and this new learning format from now to last spring is that we are using an instructional model that is based around synchronous teaching. And so synchronous teaching is different in that your child or you as a learner are attending school during regular school hours. You're just doing it from a remote location. So every hour that you have a class, which will be 8 hours a day or 8 periods a day, you have to be in attendance. Okay? So it's not, the teachers aren't just pushing out assignments for you to do whenever you want. you have to actually be in attendance and you have to be viewing the instruction live, and then you'll be required for whatever assignments, just like the on-site learners are required to do. You'll be required to do those assignments and activities and projects and things like that as well. So that looks very different. And so when we're doing that, one of the things that's important for you to know is that we had a waiver last year. Whenever schools were closed down, everybody was scrambling to come up with a learning format that kept kids from being away from school for so long that they started to lose their academic progress. And so we did the best we could with the stipulations that we were under. But moving forward, we no longer have that waiver. We're required for kids to be in school 1,116 hours in order for us to be funded as a public school. Okay, so that includes our on-site learners and our remote learners. And so that's the reason for the attendance being required each hour throughout the day. So one of the things to consider, we'll get a little bit more into the technology piece later, is if it's going to be a challenge for you to be online and connected from 8 to 3:20 every day, this might be something you want to reconsider, because it is going to require that. It's going to require a good connection, and it's going to require a schedule that allows you to be connected during those times, okay? So if you have first hour, if you have chemistry with Mr. Brewer, you'll need to be on time to Mr. Brewer's class, logged in and ready to learn by 8 o'clock, okay? And then you'll be there on screen. So you'll be a student in his classroom, but instead of a body in there, you'll be a face on a screen, okay? But you can still interact, you can still ask questions, you can still get support from the teacher, etc. Then towards the end of first period, you'll log into your next class. So if your second period is English with Mrs. Grimmett, then you need to make sure that you're on time for English second hour from a remote location. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you. And you do that throughout the day. Okay, that's what synchronous teaching is. The schedule is less flexible. Some people have wondered, well, will I have homework? Well, if you were an on-site learner, you will as a remote learner. Okay, because you'll be doing basically the same things during the class period that you would be doing if you were here at school. Okay, you'll just be doing it, like I said, from a remote location. So we did change our schedule a little bit this year, and I'm going to just show you that real quick. Students, you'll understand this probably even more than your parents, because you know what the schedule is normally like. But we added a little bit of time to the day, and the reason for that is because in this format, teachers needed some extra time to prepare for students. And so we're starting school a little bit later. And so instead of taking days off of Christmas break or off of spring break or going into the summer, we just added 10 minutes to each day. And we thought that was an easier way to absorb that time that we lost by starting school a little bit later. So you're typically used to going to school from 8 to 3:10. So it's really not a big deal. All we did was add 3 minutes to our first period class, because teachers are all going to be required to do some different procedures with lunch count and attendance and those kinds of things that we're used to. And then we added 1 minute to each period after that. And so I don't even think you're probably going to notice it as you go through the day. Of course, you're going to be doing things a little bit differently anyway. And then the Friday schedule would be similar, except you just don't have I-class, which is your 8 hour, typically on Monday through Thursday. So the accountability is a huge piece of this, okay? If you can be tardy as an on-site student, the same thing applies as a remote student. So if you're not logged into class on time, then you would be considered tardy. If you're not there within the first 5 minutes of class, then you could be counted absent, okay? So just be aware of that. We just want to make sure we're really clear that you know what it is that you're getting yourself into as far as the instructional model that you'll be using. Okay, and then at the end of the night, after you've heard the presentation, you've had a chance to visit a little bit about it, one of the decisions that I'm going to ask you to make is if you want to opt out at that point and be an on-site learner, we're going to still allow you to do that. I don't anticipate that a lot of you will, but we want to make sure that after you know exactly what the details of being a remote learner are, that you at least have that option, okay? One of the things that we are going to ask is that when you are logged in, that you present yourself similarly as if you were on site. So we just want to prevent, we don't want kids that are laying around in bed and logged into class and trying to participate. So we just want to make sure that you're sitting up, you're at a desk or a table, you're able to be connected and be able to interact in that way, and that you have to be on camera while you're logged in. That way, if the teacher wants to come over and visit with you directly, has a question for you, or you have a question for them, there's an ability to interact there, and it's done in an appropriate way, okay? So those are just some things to think about. If you happen to be, or your child happens to be a student with services, maybe on an IEP, those kinds of things, we are going to work with you to make those accommodations for those remote students as well. So you'll have an IEP manager, one of our teachers, that will be in contact with you and make certain that we are meeting the requirements and giving you the additional support for your student if they're a student on an IEP. Ms. Bibo, do you want to add anything to that detail-wise?
Just that either that your IEP manager, whoever your child's special education teacher is, will be in contact with you very soon to get that set up, because we have to have any adjustments or amendments made to the IEP before the 24th. So just be aware that they'll be contacting you and we'll get that stuff ironed out.
And everything you hear tonight is consistent with the middle school and the high school. Okay, so if you're wondering which applies to which grade levels, it all applies for 6th grade through 12th grade students. So just making sure we're clear on that. So every teacher is going to be consistent with 3 things. One of them is a platform that we're going to use for you to connect with your teacher, get assignments, turn in work, take quizzes, all of those kinds of things, is one you're familiar with, and that's Google Classroom. One thing that's going to be different from last spring is because you're going to be live, we're going to be using Google Meets every single day with all of your teachers. Okay, so Google Classroom, Google Meets, and then live synchronous teaching are 3 things that are going to be consistent with every class that you go. It doesn't matter if it's a core class or an elective class or special education class or one of the fine arts classes, that's going to be true. Okay. Now, some of those classes are more project oriented, so you may spend less time in direct instruction with the teacher. And at some point in time, they may have you working on project work and maybe even log out for a portion of the hour so you can work on your own or whatever. That may happen down the road once we make sure that we have established what's going on between the teacher and the students in each particular class. But all teachers are going to be consistent with those things. Okay. We are going to organize things in a high school very consistently from teacher to teacher, and basically what's going to happen is there's going to be a link on every teacher's Google Classroom, and correct me if I say this incorrectly, teachers, please. There's going to be a link on every teacher's Google Classroom for each student who is remote to be able to connect through Google Meets. Okay, and so that's how you're going to enter the class remote. In the middle school, we have on our webpage a calendar so you can kind of see what each teacher is doing. But the same format will be used in that we're going to have a link to that Google Meets. And if you're familiar with Zoom, Google Meets is an education version of that for K through 12 students. That's a little safer because it's managed through our network and with their student email address. But it's very similar to Zoom, but it works seamlessly with Google Classroom. So at this time, do you guys want to come up and kind of show them some of the ins and outs of those formats that we're using?
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Google Classroom. So this should be pretty, most of the students should already know how to do this because we used it in the spring, but just if you need kind of a refresher, to get to Google Classroom, they're going to just go to open up Google Chrome, and then go up here to the app launcher, which is the 9 dot, and they're just going to open up Google Classroom.
And I told these teachers they may get frustrated tonight. My computer's due for an update, so it's running a little slow, but typically you won't have that issue.
So when they are in their Google Classroom, they will see the hours, like this first one, they will see the hour that it is, like the math class first hour, and then underneath of it will be the time that that class runs. So they can come in here and see, okay, my first hour starts at 8 o'clock every day, Monday through Thursday, 9 o'clock on Friday. That will help them keep track of what time do they need to log into that class. So that'll be a good place to also see the schedule within Google Classroom. Within Google Classroom, there's kind of two tabs that they're gonna want to use. The Stream tab is for announcements. So if the teacher has, tomorrow we're gonna postpone tomorrow's quiz, they can type that in there just as a quick announcement for students. And then up here at the top, there's a classwork tab, and this is where all of their assignments will be posted. So those are the two main parts of Google Classroom that they're gonna need to use. I think Mrs. Weigel is gonna talk a little bit about Google Meet.
Okay, so right under where it says class code, it's a little small for my old eyes, but under that, the very last line in that top header says Meet link. And the nice thing is your student doesn't have to go anywhere other than right here on Google Classroom in order to connect to that Google Meet, to that live stream that the teachers are going to do. So to launch that, all they have to do is click on this link. It's going to give them, it's going to ask if they want to allow the use of the camera and the microphone, and they say that they do, which is up here. Oh, no, we don't want to show them. Okay, so you allow the camera and microphone. And I hit join now. And I believe that Mr. Menard back on his computer is also going to join. And so as a teacher, I can see not only what I'm projecting, but also the other people who are logged on. So that's where I'll be able to see my students. And each teacher will have different protocol for how you're, are you muted now?
Yep.
They'll have, why is it, it's giving me feedback. We'll be working on that. Anyway, as we are starting our classes, the teachers will have different protocol for it. If a student has a question, do they want them to raise their hand? Do they want them to just speak out? So as remote learner students, you will need to pay attention to how your teacher says, this is how I want you to interact in my class. Much the same way you would do if you were sitting in the room. You notice down here, I clicked that little button. What that does is mute my microphone. And so as a student, we're gonna mute our microphones unless we're asked to interact or we have a question and we need to interact. And the reason for that is if your house is like mine, there might be a dog barking or who knows what else going on in your house that the rest of the school doesn't necessarily need to hear while you're on and learning. The other thing is the chat box, which is right up here in the top right corner. It looks like a little message. And if your teacher may choose and say, if you have a question or you need my attention, put something in the chat and then I'll get to you as soon as I see that that's there. I might be, as a teacher, more likely to see, hey, something just popped up in my chat than I am to notice someone on a little box waving at me. So students will just need to know that that chat function is there, and you may need to use that to interact with your teacher in a live fashion. Mr. Dunham was talking about that some teachers may log out while you're working on a project. Maybe if you have to go grab some supplies around your house to do whatever they're asking you to do. There's also the possibility that you as a student have watched the math lecture and now you're working on math. Well, I'm likely, as the math teacher, going to ask you to stay logged in, because while you're working, if you had been in my room, I would be available to you to be able to answer your questions on whatever problem. So a lot of teachers will probably ask students to stay logged on during the student work time, so they're just as accessible to the student as they would be if the student was in person.
And that's going to be the rule. The other would be the exception.
Right.
So most of the time, the majority of the time, you're going to stay logged in throughout the class period. They'll give you enough time at the end of the class period to get logged out and log into your next class. You'll get basically a virtual passing period. So there'll be a little window of time when our other kids would move to their class, then you'll be able to log out and log into your next class.
So back on the presentation, we were, oh, there it is. So on here, it says under organization, high school is Google Classroom. So if you as a parent want to see what assignments or what things are going on in your student's class, have them log into Google Classroom, go to that classwork tab, and you can see what their assignments are for that class. I'm gonna let Mrs. Combs talk real quick about an additional resource that they have available in the middle school.
Slightly different at the middle school. Because like Mrs. Blackwell just said, parents can't get into the Google Classroom. That's usually the students have that account to get in. The parents still want to know when assignments are due and what the kids are doing. So the middle school, on the USD 396 webpage, we have created a resource for you as parents to go to, and the kids use this as well. We started this last spring, and it was such a useful tool then that we didn't know what it was going to look like this fall, but we already decided we're going to keep this agenda. So parents know when assignments are, what assignments are given, what, here it is, what assignments are given, when the due dates are, what the tests are, for each teacher. So this is 6th grade. And Mrs. Bailey has her math, this says Monday, Tuesday, Monday through Friday at the top. She has, she's going to put all of her math assignments in there, all of her due dates in there for the week. I'm right below, and then you also see where our names are underlined. You as parents can click on those names and email us directly from there. We have, when they scroll down, there's social studies, science, and band, vocal music, PE, and Mrs. Olivar's class as well. So everything is there for the week. Teachers are expected to have this updated by Monday morning of the week, ready to go. Okay?
And the high school students are not going to be using a format like this. They're just going to get all of their assignments through the Google Classroom from each of their teachers. We've kind of moved them into a little more independence as they've gotten older. And so as a parent, if you still want to see those assignments, you'll just have to, as Mrs. Combs and Mrs. Vidal both said, work with your student, have them open up the different Google Classrooms so you can see what's going on there.
And it's the same thing. The 7th grade is there and the 8th grade is there. So you as parents can check in on that. That's very useful. The other thing we are going to include on this, because attendance is important, we are also going to put the bell schedule here so you as parents know what time those classes start and what time your child should be logging in for attendance purposes. The other thing that's important for you guys is Parents Online. It's critical that you keep up to date with their grade. And I can log in as a parent.
All right, so while she's logging in, one of the reasons why you don't just want to look at Google Classroom is because as a student, I can turn in an assignment. It will show as turned in on Google Classroom. But you as a parent don't know if I actually did it. I could have turned in a blank sheet of paper. Hopefully none of your students would pull that, but in order to really know maybe the quality of work that your students are turning in, looking at their grades will make sure that you can say, oh, look, they turned everything in, but I see some zeros or 1% and 2%. That must mean we're not doing what we're supposed to. So just make sure you're checking.
And we ran into that last year, unfortunately. So I have my daughters up here. So if you have more than one child enrolled, it'll have all their names over on the side. So since Kindle comes right there, so Collier, when he was here, he was right below, so you can access all your children right here from this side. You will need to get an online account from the office. The other thing I'll tell you, if you try the password 3 times and you've messed up, you forgot what it was, it will lock you out. So, but it's simple. You just need to call the office and they'll unlock you and then tell you what your password was.
If you are a middle school student or parent, to get access to parents online, I guess middle school parents, to get access to parents online, if you'll call the main office and talk to Mrs. Eason, she will get you all set up. Or if you get locked out, you can call her as well and she'll get you all set up. If you are a high school parent, then you can call the main office and they'll transfer you to Mrs. Little, who is our high school registrar, and she'll do the same for you. So if you don't have an account, I would suggest calling right away this week, in the next couple of days, and getting that set up and making sure you have a password and you're ready to go before we get a week or 2 into school and you still don't have that done. Because they have the time to get you set up and they'll walk you through it. They're extremely helpful. So again, Mrs. Geeson at the middle school, Mrs. Lowell at the high school.
There's a lot of the information you can gather from this site. You can get their transcript, their schedule, things like that. But the piece I'm going to talk about tonight is the progress report, because this is the critical piece for you as parents with the remote learning. Kim only has 3 teachers that have set up the grade book so far, but all of her classes will be listed up here. So she has an entrepreneurship class with Mrs. Dressler. So as she starts getting assignments, you can just click on, this will be underlined right there. And you'll be able to click on that and see what daily assignments were given and what grade they received, and if there are any incomplete as well. The teacher's name is also underlined, so you can email them directly. Again, to me, this is a communication tool. Once the student reaches middle school teachers don't have a class at 25. We see everybody, and we have some teachers that see 150 kids. So sometimes we don't get with parents in a quick enough manner. So if you see something on the progress report that looks alarming to you, please, please, please contact that teacher. Okay.
And that's what Mrs. Combs said. That's one of the most difficult things, I think, sometimes for parents to transition when they transition their kids into middle school is, like Mrs. Combs said, middle school teachers have more kids, so you might not get as much direct communication from the teacher if your kid's doing okay. So if you're proactive, you're looking at their grades, you're looking at their Google Classroom, you're looking at the middle school webpage so you can see the calendar of assignments and those kinds of things. That is the best way to stay on top of making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do and you're holding them accountable for their assignments, grades, and those kinds of things. So it's really important. So just expect that if you had a 5th grade teacher with like I said, like Mrs. Combs said, 20 kids, and you were getting an email a couple times a week, maybe even, that's not going to happen here just because there's many more kids that those teachers are responsible for because they have one each hour of 8 hours of the day. So just kind of expect that difference, especially those of you that are coming into 6th grade. Okay, technology-wise, most of you are familiar, even if you're a 6th grade student and parent, you're probably familiar from last spring, you had Chromebook. And so we have a Chromebook for you that we will issue to you. In fact, we have it ready to go tonight if you're present. If you're not present, then I'm going to suggest, like I said earlier, that you get with our tech department, make an appointment to swing by and pick that up. Okay, so those of you that are here, they're over there on the side of the stage walkway, and it has your name on it, and you can pick those up on your way out. Okay. Also, you should have a set of books up here. If you're here tonight, you can pick those up tonight as well. If you're online, joining us online, when you make your appointment with the tech department, we'll make sure your books are with your Chromebook, so you only have to make one appointment and you get everything picked up at the same time. Okay, so that's important to know. I mentioned it earlier, but if you don't have reliable Wi-Fi, that's going to be an issue. You need to have good, solid internet service. And one of the things that we have found that is helpful, and Mrs. Blackwell, you can kind of piggyback on this, we were talking about it earlier, is you can call your internet provider and say, hey, my child is doing remote learning. They're going to be online live streaming with their teacher at their school between 8 and 3:20. Well, what we have support that. Is the speed that we have going to support that? If they say no, Of course, we all know sometimes they're going to want to upgrade you for more money, right? However, we have found through this pandemic that if you say it's for educational use, is there anything you can do for us without making us upgrade our account and pay more money? We have found in many cases that those providers will do that. They've been very user-friendly when it's for educational purposes. Did I miss anything there?
The only other thing is if you're using like a hotspot, whether it's through a phone or just a regular hotspot, you want to talk to them specifically about the streaming limits, because a lot of places like Verizon, once you hit a certain amount of streaming, you're on 5G till you hit that amount of streaming for the month, and then they'll back you off to 4 or 3G, and those slower speeds aren't going to support what you need. So just make sure, even if you're just doing hotspot, that you check on that stuff.
That's an extremely important component. It will get really frustrating really quickly if your internet doesn't support what your student is trying to do. So that's a key component to being successful. Here is our contact information for our tech department. It works best if you just contact them directly. Calling me or one of the teachers or whatever, it's just putting one more step in place to get your problem solved. And our tech department is outstanding. They're very responsive. Our tech director doesn't even mind if you text her or call her cell phone. Okay, so I've got their information. Their email address is techsupport@usd396.net. The office phone here at the school is 747-3345. And then Kim Hamilton is our director of technology. And so if you try those other two avenues, you still can't get anybody, call her on her cell phone, leave a voicemail. She's very, very busy, but she checks her voicemail frequently. So you can leave a voicemail, and I promise you she'll get back with you. Or you can shoot her a text. Just make sure you tell her who you are and what your issue is. And then she'll get back with you and get those resolved. In many cases, sometimes she's had to go out to somebody's home or, whatever they need to work out. They will take care of the issue if it's with one of our school devices. Now, if it's a service issue, an internet issue, of course, you need to work with your provider on that. But she can even maybe advise you a little bit if you're struggling with something to kind of help you troubleshoot maybe what the problem is. So I would keep that information handy, and that's on our website as well. One of the things that is available, we just want to make sure you know about, is that even if you're a remote learner, we do have food service available. So you could set up the opportunity to be able to get daily meals. Now, I will tell you this, at the middle school and high school, because of the pickup time that's been arranged, that's going to conflict with the middle school and high school students' schedules. They're going to be in class during that time. So if you don't have another person at home, obviously I know middle school kids can't drive, so a parent would have to do that anyway. But high school kids, it's going to be tough for them to go pick up their own meals because they're going to be in class at that time. And they only get a 20-minute lunch, and so they're not going to have time in most cases to go get that. We'll try to do our best to make it an efficient, streamlined process. But if you want meals, they are available. And there's a link right here that I'm going to have Mrs. Lidewell click on. And this is on our website as well. You can just go to usd396.net and you will see, lock it out. You got it. She's going to go a different route.
Okay, so on the website, if you just go to the homepage.
There you go.
If you go maybe faster than this computer to the homepage, down on the left side in the quick links, you'll find the menu information, and it will give you an option, which I'll show you in just a second when it loads.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So if you scroll down here to the quick links, see it says cafeteria menu, you click menu information, and then it will take us to a spot where we select, I think it says remote learning lunches, remote learning food service.
And again, I just want to reiterate while she's kind of waiting for that to pop up there, that you're probably going to, for this to work for you, you're probably going to need somebody who's available to go get it besides the student. And so just keep that in mind if you're considering a meal option.
So it's just remote learning order form, and you do this each day, to say what they want, and the menus are available, so students can choose, do they want salad, or do they want whatever the hot.
Whatever the entree is.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And
So
then-
this is very similar to how you chose to be remote learners for this, you just use a form just like that.
And then it'll provide a location for pickup and all those sorts of things. So just know that's available. If you got somebody that's around that can drive up and pick that up, those will be ready to go if you order them. And so that's just kind of a nice service that we're trying to provide. And at this point, I think we've covered everything on our end, but we want to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. And I'm going to ask these ladies if there's some questions more related to instruction and stuff going on with the classroom. They can help me answer those as well. So what questions do you have at this point? Oh, that's a great point. Thank you, Mrs. Bailey. Because we are being held accountable for tracking student attendance, which is different than last spring, you treat an absence just like you would if they were on site as far as how you notify us. So if your child's sick and they're going to be too ill to do their work or to log in that day, call the office and talk to one of our secretaries and just let them know, hey, my child's ill today, this is their name, and they'll make sure that they notify the teacher. Now, the policy with an absence is the same as if they were an on-site learner. They get the day they're absent plus 2 days to get that work they missed in. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm glad you mentioned that because we need to make sure that we know if they're going to be absent for a reason that a parent is excusing. And as some of you were here for Mrs. McCune's meeting, we've relaxed our attendance policies this year, but we still have to track it, okay? Because we're not going to encourage kids to come if they have any symptoms or anything like that. And if you're too sick to engage online, then you probably need to just stay in bed. Just give us a call so we know that, and then make sure you're working with your teachers to get those assignments because you will have to make up that work just like you would if you were an on-site student. Okay, that's a great point. Any other questions that you guys have?
I was gonna ask, we live way out in the country,
Okay.
out that way, and, we have Wi-Fi, but like on rainy days, it might not work.
Okay, so the question is, or the comment was, they live out in the country, they have Wi-Fi that works okay, but sometimes the weather affects that. Okay, so if you guys that are online maybe have that same issue. So those days that you're struggling to connect, what I would suggest you do is call the office and let them know, hey, my child is not ill, but they're going to be absent today, most likely because they're having trouble connecting. And then they'll notify teachers that way. Then just like you were absent because you couldn't connect, that is a reason for the absence. Then you would work with that teacher, get those assignments, and make sure you get those in that 2-day window. Okay, that's a great question. Mr. Menard, do we have any questions online?
I've been answering them as we go. We're good.
Okay, outstanding. Yes.
If we have something with our schedule and we want to change it, but we're doing remote, how do we get that fixed?
Okay, so you would email Mrs. Little. Okay, so jlittle@usd396.net. So the question is, if we need a schedule change, we're doing remote. Yeah, if you're on site, you would go see Miss Little. If you're remote, you just email her. Okay, and then you let her know what your wishes are with your schedule change, and if she can make it work, she will. I will tell you though, the deadline is the end of the first week of school. So you guys come back on the 24th. By Friday of that week, if you don't have your schedule changed, you're not going to be allowed to do that. Okay? That applies for middle school and high school. Okay, I'm sorry. No, that's a good point, Mrs. Glidewell. That's high school. So I'm answering your question directly for you. Middle school, if you guys have a schedule issue, they're less likely because there are just less options. But if you have a schedule issue, then you would call Mrs. Geeson in the high school, middle school office, and she will work with you on your schedule to get that corrected or changed, or to answer any questions you have related. Thank you, Ms. Glidewell. That was a good point. Any other questions anyone has? Okay, again, I really appreciate you coming tonight. We really feel like we've selected a model that's going to work well, but please communicate with us if you're having issues, if you're having trouble. Communicate with your teachers, okay, or your child's teachers. Communicate with the tech department if it's a technology issue. Communicate with Mr. Menard and I if you have administrative questions or policy questions. We want to help you with those questions. So don't let yourselves get frustrated. Make sure you give us a chance to walk you through solutions. Mr. Menard?
We did have one that is probably good for everybody to know from Danielle. She said, what is the policy of a child that does test positive for COVID? Do you want to just touch base briefly maybe on that?
Okay, so a remote student?
She just says a child test positive, so
Okay.
I'm assuming it's in person.
So you all parents got an email from Mr. Reynolds with our district operating plan. And so there are lots of details in there about what we do in different scenarios, and we would be here forever if we went through all of those. But anytime we have a positive case, then we have a mandatory 14-day quarantine. And then there's a succession of steps that we have to take within that quarantine, which is a protocol we have to follow for readmittance to school. If you're a remote learner and you have a positive COVID test and you're well enough to continue to learn that way, and it's not, you're not bedridden and unable to connect, we would encourage you to do that. But those days you feel too sick, if you come down with the virus, then just again notify the office that you're absent, okay? But anybody that tests positive has a 14-day quarantine. The other issue we have if we have a positive test is then we have to contact trace with that person. So whenever there's a positive test or a first symptom, we would go back 48 hours and we would look for any person that was in close contact with that person who is showing the symptoms or has the positive test. Those people would also then quarantine. And then we do that with each person who is under those or under that umbrella. Okay. Hopefully that answers the question. Lots of variables this year. Nothing is simple. You know, Mrs. McCune said we have a process for how we, let kids go to the bathroom this year. Well, everything requires a process. There's a different process for teachers to enter the building than there ever has been. We're going to do our very best to keep people as safe as we can, but we also know whether it's remote or on-site, kids need to be back in school and learning. And so we're going to do the very best we can to provide that learning opportunity and give a model that provides a great learning experience for the kid. Okay? Any other questions that anyone has? Awesome. I think probably most of you know, but I just realized I didn't introduce myself. I introduced these teachers, but if you're wondering who I am, I'm the middle school, high school principal. My name is Scott Dunham. I want to encourage you anytime to give me a call if you have any questions or if there's anything I can help you with. Like I said, don't let your frustration build. Communicate with one of us, all of our teachers, our secretaries, Mr. Menard, our assistant principal. We're happy to answer those questions and help you out. If we don't have the answer, we'll do what we can to find the answer. Okay, thanks again for coming tonight. Make sure you come down here and pick up your books. If you're on site, then make sure you pick up your device. If you're not on site and you're online, make sure you arrange an appointment to do that. Thank you. Have a good evening.
I heard those direct commissions of